The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business. From $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters at Real Estate Marketing, Arter SEO.
Welcome to the Icons of Real Estate Podcast. I'm Tim Calloway. We have a very special guest from north of the border today. Our guest is Glen Sutherland. And Glen is a real estate investor, as well as a real estate coach and podcast host from, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glen, Ontario. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm doing it all from Ontario.
Fantastic. So Glen has invested with a buy and hold mentality. He also does a lot of research and learned that investing south of the border, which finally is the United States, with our lower cost of entry, might be the best bet for you. So from Canada and from a Canadian investing in the USA, welcome Glen Sutherland. How are you, Glen?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So let's just start from the beginning. It's not often that, we hear here in the States that, hey, from another country, this is a good place to invest. So how did you get started? One, investing. Two, how did you get started investing in the States versus maybe just Canada?
Yeah. Well, I guess it doesn't matter where you are, even if you're in the United States. The odds are that your backyard is not the best place to invest in the entire United States, unless you're that, because really, like, no matter where you are, there's going to be one neighborhood that's probably better, one city that's probably better. I started, like most people, I started with my own backyard. I used to live in Cambridge, Ontario, and I was investing in Cambridge, Ontario, and the next city north of me, which is Kitchener. And I was doing rental properties there, and it was doing okay. And I had a tenant that moved about 2 hours away, and they were amazing tenants. They paid on time. They were painted the house on their own, the interior. They did a really good job. Like they were constantly improving the property. So I wanted to keep them as a tenant. And whenever they were moving, I went and bought a place over there for them to move into because I want to keep them. Yeah. But it also made me realize that, and start to build systems, right? To be able to work this from a distance. When it was in my backyard, the big crutch you have is yourself. And I started going to the property, cleaning stuff, fixing stuff. I was constantly doing honestly way too much of the work, right? And as I got farther away, I had to learn how to hire people, start working with people, start building teams, and start building systems in order to run this whole thing. And this was back probably, 7-8 years ago. And in that time frame, podcasting wasn't what podcasting is now.
Right.
Now there's so many podcasts, and back then for real estate podcasts, there was like 10 or 15 all that existed, and they were all American based. At least any of the ones I was listening to were not Canadian based. So I started hearing this and listening to it, and I started talking to some of these people who were doing this in the US, and I realized that there was a bunch of advantages to doing this in the United States over doing it in Canada, right? Like the big one is landlord law. Our landlord law is not great in Ontario, right? To do evictions can take you 6 months to a year, similar to California law, right? It's really tough. It's really in the tenant's favor. So that's what I usually say is the easiest comparison is to compare it to California. So anyway, I took the dive into the United States, and I don't know what you're looking for. I can talk about like the laws, the whatever, but whatever. What would interest people who listen to your show the most?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think most folks that are listening, it's kind of an inverse, from the American side of it. Is it wise to invest in Canada? And from the Canadian side of it, what's the draw to the United States? I know you had mentioned a couple of times like friendlier laws, and I think you're alluding to it there when you talk about it being similar in Canada to California. Is there a sweet spot as far as states go, as far as in the United States, which state is kind of a sweeter deal? And we talked about, you being a visitor to Florida, is there any one state that seems to be a better fit overall?
Well, there's lots of states that are great, right? And I think it's figuring out what your strategy is and then matching it up with the state, right? Um, so if you're trying to do like just straight buy and holds, you're probably going to do best off in the interior of the United States,
Okay.
the middle of the United States, because the purchase prices are lower. When you end up putting some leverage on purchasing these properties, you're really putting down very little amount of money.
Right.
And you're still collecting a decent amount of rent. So you're like your percentage wise, you're going to do much better. But actual amount of money that's actually showing up is going to be less because the rents are less, right? But percentage wise, for just straight rentals. And then I like the more borders, the Floridas and stuff for flips. They do really
Right.
well for flips. And then like really the if you're going to do like rent-to-owns, or not rent-to-owns. Well, rent-to-owns work everywhere. Everyone's looking to be a homeowner. So we do those, but I still mostly do those in the center. And it's mostly just because the mortgages are more expensive in Florida. Not the rate, just because it's a higher price point that I'm
Right.
paying a higher amount. Actually, for Canadians, there's even probably for Americans, there's a lot more mortgage options in Florida than other places.
Right.
Um, but if you're going to go into the Airbnb field, then you can do that anywhere, but you have to have honestly, you want a big attraction. You can do this in any little city, but I've done it in like some little towns in Ohio, and it does work.
Hmm.
The problem with mine is I was too close to the university, so I was attracting parties.
Ah,
Yeah.
maybe that's a
So,
new website we should start. The Party B&B.
yeah, no, you don't want that.
No, you don't want that, right?
You don't want that. It's the every weekend getting the call from the local police authorities telling you that they need to clean this place out, and they want permission to go in, and you're like, go in, clean it out. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. They're disturbing
Right.
all kinds of neighbors. Let's get it done.
Right. You're like, I can't believe I'm having this call at 4 in the morning, first of all.
Yeah.
This isn't what I signed up for. So, I know, and we're going to get into your coaching here in a bit, but I wanted to kind of brush on some topics there. Analyzing deals. That's one of your topics. And, how do you analyze deals when looking for a property?
Okay, well, there's a lot to that, right? And it also like the same sort of thing. It's just going to depend where you're at, what city or what kind of state it is. A lot of times, what I'm looking for with my rentals is I want purchase plus reno to be 65% of the ARV, right? That's my kind of golden formula
Mhm.
that I'm like trying to do when I'm working in like the Missouris, the Ohio's, the Indianas. The
Right.
thing is, if you go into Florida, you go into Arizona, you go into more expensive states, it just isn't there.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult unless you get into very rough neighborhoods, right? And that's one of the reasons, because I want those kind of ratios, and it's because of lending that I'm looking for those kind of numbers, and because a lot of times foreign national lending, because believe it or not, as an American investing in the US, you're going to get better interest rates and better leverage than Canadians, because honestly, we're more risk, right?
Right.
Even if we have the credit score, they don't have the same recourse to chase us down. So a lot of times, and it fluctuates throughout the year what the leverage rates is. Sometimes it's 75 on a cash out refi. Sometimes it goes down to 65, which is kind of where it is now because lending's not looking great right now. But I want to be able to perfect burr these. Meaning, whenever I refinance, I want to strip all of my money back out of the property in order to be able to be buying it. So that's why I'm looking there. But when I'm looking to buy flips, I'm not looking for that same thing. I'm looking for a set amount of money, right? I want a certain number I'm trying to hit. Like I want to make, my partner needs to hit a certain percentage to make in a certain amount of time. And it depends on how long the reno is, but I want to hit like, $50,000 or $80,000 on the flip, right? And it has to be worth it with these carrying costs. Because if you go into markets that are more expensive, you're going to take out bigger loans on the projects while
Yeah.
you're doing renovations, and the carrying cost is going to be higher. So it has to make sense, right? The whole thing has to make sense.
Right. So you mentioned partners, but it kind of triggered something in my mind. Do you look for realtors in specific areas to do the boots on the ground work for you? Are you coming out looking at the property, surveying the property, doing the legwork? How does that work for you?
No, yeah, I use realtors and wholesalers
Awesome.
mainly.
Okay.
Um, and I think the trick to talking with, I think this might sound really obvious. It's probably come up on your podcast a dozen times, but when you're talking to realtors or wholesalers or whoever's finding you these deals, be very specific about what you want. I
Right.
don't, if someone's, when realtors send me those trickle down lists of, hey, here's
Yeah,
every property in this price range, I'm like,
it's the
unsubscribe.
worst. Yeah.
This is too much work. It's gonna be like, if you want my business, like send me properties that you think are gonna be fits. I'll run my analysis on those things and everything. You know my numbers. I'll tell them all the numbers I'm looking for, the neighborhoods I'm looking for.
Right.
Every single hits, I will buy every one of them.
Right.
It's a game. It's harder to find the properties than to find the money.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And I would say most novice investors, and it doesn't matter where you're from, most novice investors, that's their big fear, right? Is I don't really have the capital to do this.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that a little bit? You know, well, actually, let's just go into your coaching. I think that's probably a bigger, a bigger area where you probably cover that a little bit. You do coach individuals who are looking to partner with you and build teams here in the States. What does that partner look like? What does that student look like? And, who should they be? Is it everybody, or tell me about that?
Okay, so those are different things. So for partners that I'm working with, right? And it depends on what kind of partner they're going to be, because I do take on debt partners, which would be like private lenders that just pay an interest rate every month for borrowing the money, as well as I take on equity partners, which would be like a joint venture situation where two of us
Mhm.
will buy the property, one person will be the working partner, where one person will be the money partner. Um, I'm usually looking for someone who's a little bit more passive. When you get someone that's too active and too interested in it, you end up stepping on your toes and talking
Mhm.
over you and talking to the realtor around you. Because I've worked with both kinds of partners, and it's a lot easier to work with someone passive, and you just give them their weekly update or bi-weekly update or monthly update on how the renovation or whatever's going. Is a lot easier to do. Um, I'm not interested. I don't even care what the tile looks like. I don't care what the paint
Right.
color is. I don't care any of this stuff. So whenever I get some partners that are used to doing this themselves, it's a lot, right? Because it's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
calls and they're going to be picky about a lot of these things. And I'm like, no, I want to buy, like, I want the contractor to buy tile in bulk and put the same tile in all my houses
Yeah.
and get me a discount on it, right? That's what I'm looking for more than I want each house to look unique. I'm not a HGTV flipper or an
Right.
HGTV burr. Like, it's okay for mine to look all the same, right? I'm
Right.
sometimes not as glamorous there. Um, for students, though, I'm looking for someone the opposite that is very active. I usually do 5-on-1 coaching, right? Because you got to scale this. There's too many people that want to do it. Um,
Mhm.
and you can usually tell by like week 3 or 4 of the program who is going to be successful. And it's the people who are actually taking the steps. Like the first week we do an intro, the second week we start talking about markets, right? And the students that start going, oh, well, maybe I should be doing this market analysis. You showed me how you did a market analysis and how you looked at the sub markets and how you're doing all this. And the ones who start doing it themselves, and then the ones that would, the next week after that, we start building teams. The ones who start contacting contractors, contacting property managers, and going through the questionnaires and filling the stuff out and working their way through it. Those are the ones that are going to be successful. And it's,
Right.
there's no secret formula. It's obvious the ones that are doing the work are going to be successful. The ones who say, I'm going to finish the whole course, see the whole thing, and then I'm going to try to figure out how to put this all together myself. It's going to be so much harder because it all
Right.
builds on each other. So it's for coaching, active.
Right.
For investors, partners, passive.
Sure. I mean, I've hired coaches in my life at different stages, of course, and it's for the betterment of me, right? I mean, coaches, whether you look at them from sports, whether you look at them from business or person, your person, they're there to solve the problems and the day-to-day complications that people run into. And I hate to see someone hire a coach and then do exactly what you said. It's funny you said it that way. Well, I'm going to take all this information, I'm going to extrapolate, I'm going to break it down, I'm going to go, how does this work for me, and how can I make it my own? And the reality is, you're giving them the recipe, right? I mean, you
There's nothing hidden.
right. There's nothing hidden. You're transparent. Here's the keys to the kingdom. Run with it, and then they go, oh wait, I want to manipulate this a little bit and suit it to my needs. And it's like, well, if your needs worked, you'd be telling me what to do. And that sounds callous, I know, but that's a reality. And I don't want to see anybody, fail. But
But
I think,
it is a win-win. Everybody
yeah,
who's a student, there is a win-win opportunity from everybody. because the people who are passive people, or passive, we'll say investors, who aren't interested in doing all the work, and once they see what I actually do, when they take the course and they see how much work there is involved in doing the business that I do, a lot of them go, several of them will say, I'm not interested. But you know what those people are? Those could be your partners.
Yeah.
Because they understand everything you do. They understand all the work you're putting in. They respect the work you're putting in because they've seen your whole system. You've showed them the back end. You've shown them how it works. They see that you've been successful, and they could be perfect passive partners to actually work on the projects with you.
Yeah, that's great. No, really. So we've talked about the past, kind of how you got here, and then we talked about what you're doing now, and kind of how you vet things and research things. So let's talk about the future a little bit. Real blank question here, but where do you see your business 5 years from now versus today? Whether it be your coaching business or your real estate business, kind of where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Well, I am starting some new different ventures, but I think what the main thing is, but the main thing is, okay. Well, the new ventures is I have started working on a syndication, right? So we'll be buying the larger apartment buildings, and I don't know. We're not going to go into that whole thing, but
sure.
That's a whole other interview. But yeah, we're looking at buying some bigger things, and with being in bigger projects, and even my future, I think every single month I'm trying to free myself from the business more. It's figuring out what you do, writing down what you do, and then figuring out who else could do this. And it sounds really easy. And at the start, it was really painful. And you're still going to have checks and balances for everything, which is the big thing. But what I'm trying to do is I want to be the person, to actually do the interaction with the people, and slowly farm out as much of the actual work of doing this. For some of the obvious ones are, instead of doing bookkeeping, hire an accountant, which I've done. And then there's certain things you're like, deal analysis. Could I hire someone to do that? And I just give a thumbs up or down. Could I hire someone to do a lot of these other parts of the business so that I'm not as active, not having to do that part of it, instead doing the part I enjoy.
Right. I mean, it's got to be that why, right? I mean, it's got to be that when you wake up in the morning, you go, I look forward to doing that. Oh my gosh, but I've got 4 other things that my personality or whatever dictates that I'd rather not do. And I think once you get to that one thing that really motivates you every day, it's not a job anymore, and it's something you can kind of relax. And especially if you can replicate it in every part of your life and every part of your business, it just booms, 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 booms. So that's good stuff, man. It really is. So give me some predictions, kind of putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to talk about predictions. Housing market, what do you see? It's been an interesting time. For the past few years, especially with COVID and everything else. But we're seeing a little bit of shift, a little bit of moderation happening. Where do you see things short and long term?
So I know anyone who tells you they know what the future is going to be is a liar. So
that's why I asked you, Glenn. That's why I asked.
When COVID started, everybody thought it was the end, right?
Yeah.
I knew a lot of people that just stopped projects, didn't close on projects that were going to do it. And I kept going through, and it gave a lot of opportunity, especially the very start of COVID, because a lot of contractors became available that weren't available because people just got scared and done. The same thing is kind of happening now, right? The people are scared, and it will cause a slow. The interest rates are jumping crazily in both countries, which is going to scare people as well and make numbers harder to work, right? I told you about my formula to buy.
Yeah.
When you're working with a formula like that, there's lots of room before you start losing money, right? You pat it all in. And there's always going to be ups and downs in the market, and there's going to be a dip. But to say this is a recession, in my opinion, I don't see it. The reason is that it's not the same factors that were driving 2008. It is, the biggest part of it is, in my opinion, is these interest rates, and that's controllable by the Fed. That's controllable by the government. These are numbers that they can actually change to if things start to go bad. They don't want to see this happen again. They don't want a 2008.
Sure.
The government has the ability to change it.
None of us do. Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're
Buy
right.
right.
And historically, actually, even with the rise in interest rates are still fantastic. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I remember 17%, believe it or not. I mean, I was around for that in the early 80s. For my son, I have a son that's looking to buy his first home, and he's like, "Gosh, Dad, 6.5%. It was just 4.5%." I just go, yeah, why don't you just sit there and do nothing? I mean, if you love a home, or whether you're an investor or you're a long-term buyer, or you're going to live in it, you're going to rent it out, worrying about 5.5% versus 6.5% or whatever it may be, for someone, I don't think that's justified paranoia at all.
Right.
Relatively speaking, where we're supposed to be. So,
I have 2 tips. I'll give 2 tips
yeah,
right before
let's
you
hear
jump.
it.
So 2 tips for this if you think there's a recession coming. First of all, buy these properties right. How you buy these is going to be your thing. Don't be paying retail prices if you're an investor. Buy them right and get your long-term loans in place. Because if things go scary, banks close, right?
Sure.
You can ride it through. You haven't lost anything to your soul. Those are the big things. Buy
Right.
these things at a discount and long-term loans. Don't get the short loans anymore.
Right. Definitely not. You don't know what's going to happen. You turn around one day and your interest rate doubles or something to that effect. You don't want any of that.
Yeah. Or your loan expires. You did like a 3-year loan, and then
Yeah.
there's nothing to renew into. Like they
Right.
close the Canadian loans in US banks. They close the programs that Canadians can get first. The riskier loans. So for me,
Wow.
you gotta
You got to go long. You got to act quick and go long term. Lock that in. Yeah, for
Yep.
sure. So for students or anybody who just wants to, you seem pretty free and open about discussing real estate with folks, which I think is great. Easy to talk to. How do people get in touch with you? And I'll ask you that, Glenn, and then I'll give everybody kind of the last word. Any thoughts, tidbits, and hyperbole, that people want to hear. So how do they get in touch with you, and what do you got to say to close this out?
Sure. Well, if you want to just learn for free, which is where a lot of people want to go, is I do a podcast every week, Canadian Investing in the US. It's on all the platforms, including YouTube, but it's really a podcast. So it's better as audio, in my opinion. Most people listen to it as audio.
Right.
But that glensutherland.com, one N in Glen. And if you're like, I can't find this website, I don't know how to spell that. I also own the domain of Canadian Investing in the US, a Canadian Investing in the USA. It all links to the same glensutherland.com. So one of those things, you should probably be able to find me. And from there, it links out to the coaching. It links out to the podcast, the YouTube channel, all the jazz.
Fantastic. Well, Glenn, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Really enjoyed hearing about how you operate here in the US, and some pretty sage advice, I would say. Look forward to talking to you again. GlenSutherland.com, a Canadian investing in the USA. Thanks for being on the show, Glenn.
Thanks, Tim.
Talk to you.